return procedure which we use. And what we see is that there's a lot of international interest in the formula. We have had visitors of the Council of Europe, the EU, different EU member states, and also from outside the EU to study the model. It's really a cost-effective element, because the figure for October was that it costs 85 euros per person per day. Remember, for a close detention it's 180 to 190. So you see there's a lot of saving that can be done in this way. But obviously there are also concerns with this. One of the big reasons, the big, I'm not saying flaw, but an element which needs to be studied further is how to diminish the absconding rate. So you see 25% normally on average, and people within the Dublin scheme, so who have to go back to another EU member state to apply there for visa, we see that's even 50%. There's also a certain danger, but I don't know how big this should be seen, of becoming a pull factor, because you provide a lot of facilities for a family. You have to find a balance, in fact, between providing what is necessary and at the same time not giving too much in order to become too attractive to apply for asylum in Belgium. There's also what the authorities define as a necessity to further develop cooperation with the others, to look at flexibility, who has to be where, at what time, do people move in too quickly to family units or not. So there's still work on this one as well that should be done. And another project which is developing in Belgium is, and I should have said this, with the family units, these coaches, which were mentioned earlier, they come daily to the people in the family unit, speak with them, talk with them, try to find solutions for them. So the coaching at home, that's a different model. So we're really going there now for the moment through the necessary legislative work to have this up and running. It is not always necessary to move people immediately from the moment they receive their negative decision, to move them immediately to somewhere else. So sometimes it can be best to keep them in their own house and then to prepare them from their own house in order to leave the country. So especially for families with minor children, that obviously seems like a good idea. Now the focus for this particular project is on the greater city agglomerations, because you have concentrations of people there. What they would try to do is bring people then to the offices of the municipality, neutral ground, and again where they talk a lot with them and try to find the best solution for everybody. I think that's about it. As said, I'm not the expert. I'm very open to answer any questions you might have. I hope I can answer them. I would certainly take note of them, but understood as well that you would get the presentation afterwards. And then Geert Verbouwheden, whom you might know is active in the IDC as well, he is more than happy to reply to your detailed questions as well. Thank you very much, Sandra.
Michael, since you are forced to leave us soon, and we are forced to connect to Washington, D.C., so while Rachel is connecting us, we can take one or two questions, okay? אז אם יש שאלות, אם יש שאלה או שתיים למייקל, so I'll give you the other microphone.
This is not your turn.
If you can do it in English, then...
Sure. I think I can ask it strong enough. Okay. Wait, it's not working. Okay. I mean, I can speak strong enough.
For the translate.
Oh, okay.
It's not better.
Okay. Okay, so maybe it's a short question, so you can just repeat it.
Okay.
Okay, great. Actually, just about that. First of all, thank you. It's about you mentioned Fedazil.
Oh, thank you. You mentioned Fedazil, and just I didn't quite understand what office does that belong to. I mean, is it operated by the welfare office in Belgium? I mean, who are actually the people that are in charge? For example, about the alternatives that you mentioned, that the representative from the Fedazil is the one that approaches the families.
So,
and what is the difference between them and the immigration?
thank you. I hope it works. Yeah, it works. Thank you. Again, as I understand it, Fedazil, they work for a specific, they have their own minister who is above them. So he's a state secretary. In fact, he's responsible for asylum and migration. So that's their only role. I see them as independent, and I'm 95% sure they're independent. And then the immigration office, that's Ministry of Interior. So that's the Minister of Interior Affairs. So they work together, but they're still separately in the government system.
Okay, so their sole purpose is to be in charge of...
Yes. So then there's obviously coordination as well with all the other ministries, because children of asylum seekers, they have a schooling obligation as well, so there's a need for consultation with them. Social services, there you have often the local municipalities which are responsible for these. So again, you need coordination with those. So Fedazil really works with everybody in the field.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael, you keep emphasizing you're not the expert, but you seem to have very detailed knowledge as a political counselor in Tel Aviv.
I studied.
You studied it all for the presentation? And second question related to the Eritreans. I know from some of your neighboring countries there is some talk about the link between the Eritreans not reaching Israel anymore and them coming to Europe. Is that also an assessment? Are there any assessment of the link between these two phenomena?
I don't know whether it's whether people that previously would have gone to Israel, whether they're now going to Europe.
Around the same time,
Yes.
Certain countries started to take in much bigger numbers of Eritreans.
Yes, it can certainly be, because when you look at the route, and I think Morty can correct me on this, but when you look at the route that Eritreans took, often they went not staying to Libya, and then they moved through Egypt to Israel. Now you see that they're moving towards Europe, and I think that's so. I think there's definitely a certain link between the two of them. I think you cannot exclude it, but yeah, you have to see it in that way. But whether it's a direct connection, whether people don't go to Europe because they can't go to Israel, or whether Europe has just become much more attractive to them for other reasons, that I don't know. I see a Skype behind me already.
Say hi.
Hello. So I'll leave you now to Skype. I think very interesting. Has a lot of nice things to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Gary, can you just say something? Okay. Just checking the sound, but we can hear you.
Okay.
We're just introducing next time.
So in addition, I'm ready whenever you are again.
Very well. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good afternoon. Should I say good morning, Gary?
Yes, it is morning here.
We are here in Jerusalem this afternoon. It's a room crowded with people from NGOs, civil society, academics, some parliamentarians, members of different diplomatic missions here in Israel. And all of us have your CV, so we are aware of your record. Mr. Gary Mead is a former Executive Associate Director at the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Department of Homeland and Security, Washington, D.C. He will talk to us about United States Risk Classification Assessment Tool and then we will be able to come up with some questions just before we close this session. Thank you, Gary.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today. You know, sometimes when you're dealing with government officials, they're sort of faceless people who, you know, don't have any particular identity. But when I was the Director of Enforcement and Removal Operations for ICE, people used to tell me that I was the person that more than 50% of America was mad at 100% of the time, because we were either enforcing immigration laws too aggressively or not aggressively enough, depending upon your point of view. And it is, regardless of your point of view, an extremely large program, and a very interesting program, and one that, in spite of its mission that's sometimes criticized, it really is trying to be innovative and humane. And some of the things we're going to talk about today, the automated risk classification assessment tool, the alternative to detention program, and also I understand you'd like to hear a little bit about how we deal with people from countries that can't be removed to or deported to very easily. And so I'm looking forward to talking about all three of those things. And I would like it to be interactive, so if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. One of the benefits of being a former government official is that I can be painfully candid when answering your questions, so hopefully you'll have some. You know, before I jump into the three topics, I think for some of you it would be useful to just have a quick overview of the immigration enforcement program that Immigration and Customs Enforcement is ICE, as it's known, is responsible for, because the numbers are sometimes hard to believe by people who aren't familiar with the scope of our program. So first of all, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement mission is fairly straightforward. It is to arrest and detain and deport people who are in the United States unlawfully. That is the mission. Nationwide, ICE employs about 8,000 employees. If you include attorneys, it's about 9,000 employees nationwide. We operate about 200, or utilize about 200 detention centers. They range in size from as many as 3,000 people down to perhaps less than 10 on an average daily basis. They range from maximum security facilities that look very much like traditional jails to very low security residential centers that for the most part don't look or operate anything like jails. So, and everything in between. Over 400,000 people a year pass through these detention centers. Sometimes their stay there is extremely short, a day or two. Sometimes it can go on for months, and rarely, but this does happen occasionally, years they're there. The average length of stay is about 29 days. We maintain an average daily population of right around 34,000 people in detention on any given day. That number goes up sometimes to maybe 37,000, 38,000 people in detention. Sometimes it drops down closer to 30,000, but over the course of a year it's about 34,000 people in detention, and that's what we have the funding to maintain. We have about 25,000 people on our formal alternatives to detention program. These are people who are not in custody, but they are under supervision, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that in a minute. And then there's an extremely large group of people who are going through the immigration court process, who are not in detention, are not on the formal alternatives to detention program, who are just out in the communities based on a cash bond or some very low level of supervision where they may have to report into ICE every month or a couple of months. And there are probably 200,000 people in that status. So there are somewhere between 200 and 300,000 people going through the immigration process. And this is the immigration process for people who are probably here unlawfully for the most part. This is not the group of people who are going through the process of becoming U.S. citizens. So it is a very large program. At the end of the day, ICE deports somewhere right around 400,000 people a year. And those 400,000 people go to virtually every country in the world, but predominantly they go to Mexico and Central America. Probably in excess of 80% of the 400,000 people are going back to Mexico or Central America. But as I said, we do deport people to virtually every country in the world, and I'll talk a little bit about the difficulties in doing that later on. Okay, so of the 400,000 people that we deport every year, we do try and do that based on priorities, because as many of you probably know, there are estimated to be in excess of 11 million people in the United States unlawfully. And that number sort of replenishes itself every year as people come into the country. And so even by removing 400,000 a year, we really don't reduce the total number of people who may be unlawfully present at all. But we do have priorities based on using our funding as wisely as we can. Our highest priorities are to deport unlawfully present persons who pose a threat to either national security or community safety. That's the highest priority. The second priority is to remove people who are recent border crossers, to show that there is a deterrence if you attempt to come here unlawfully across the border. And other priorities include people who were ordered removed from the United States by an immigration judge and they absconded rather than leave. Another staggeringly high number. We estimate that there are between 400 and 500,000 people in the United States who were ordered to leave and did not go home. And they are at large in the United States. And then our last priority are people who have been removed from the country multiple times and come back. Close to 100% of the people that we remove in a given year, the 400,000 that we deport, close to 100% of them fall into one of those categories, and sometimes they actually fall into multiple categories. About 2/3 of the 400,000, somewhere around 260, 270,000 of those people are individuals who, in addition to being in the United States unlawfully, have been convicted of some other crime or crimes. And in some cases, those crimes are serious, very serious. Murder, rape, child pornography, child molestation, crimes that no one would argue are serious crimes. They are. So, in order to accomplish that, to remove that many people a year, our officers must process into the system somewhere between 400,000 and 500,000 new cases every year. And it's important that this be done for a number of reasons, to make sure that we are putting the right people into detention, because detention is extremely expensive. The United States spends about $1.5 billion a year to detain these people, and to make sure that people who don't pose any particular threat to the community or national security are not detained, while they go through the immigration court process. Prior to 2011, hundreds of ICE officers all around the country were processing hundreds of thousands of persons who were essentially here unlawfully, and they were doing it in a pretty good way, pretty successful way, but inconsistently. They were doing it based on very general guidelines. They were doing it manually. They were documenting information by hand. And there was a fair amount of subjectivity involved in terms of how the officers would interview the immigrants and what questions they would ask and how they would document the answers. There was no consistent format for doing that. So in 2011, we determined that we really needed to automate and standardize the way that we processed people into the immigration system. And as a result of that decision, we brought together about 50 people. Obviously, we had some ICE law enforcement officers with experience in doing this kind of work. But I think as important, we also had members of various immigration advocate groups. We had members of the faith-based community. We had academics. And so we tried to be as inclusive as we could to make sure that anyone who was a stakeholder in the immigration process was present. We had immigration